The lobby of Morrison Hotels gleamed with afternoon sunlight. Margaret Chen, 52, stood near the reception desk in her tailored beige dress, her confidence unmistakable. Yet something in her eyes revealed uncertainty. Margaret had built an empire. 20 years of 14-hour days, missed birthdays, and cold dinners had transformed a small property management company into one of the city's most successful hotel chains. But success had cost her a marriage. Now, her ex-husband David was remarrying, and the invitation sat in her purse like a stone. She didn't want to go alone. Pride, perhaps, or maybe just the human need not to face certain moments in solitude. That's when she noticed him. Thomas Sullivan was wiping down a table near the window, his white shirt crisp despite hours of work. 58, with graying hair and kind eyes, he moved with the quiet dignity of someone who'd learned that honest work was nothing to apologize for. His 12-year-old daughter Emma often did homework in the corner after school, and Margaret had noticed how gently he'd bring her juice, how patiently he'd help with math problems during his breaks. "Excuse me," Margaret approached, her voice softer than it was in boardrooms. "I have an unusual request." Thomas looked up, surprised but attentive. "Ma'am, I need someone to accompany me to a wedding tomorrow." "My ex-husband's wedding." The words tumbled out faster than she intended. "I'll pay you, of course, $1,000 for the day. You just need to be there. Maybe pretend we're together." "I know it sounds a whimy," Thomas asked simply. Margaret paused. "Because I've watched you with your daughter. You're kind, real. I don't need impressive. I need decent." Thomas studied her face, seeing past the executive armor to the loneliness beneath. "Keep your $1,000, he said quietly, "but I'll go with you, on one condition." "What's that?" "Afterward, you have dinner with me and Emma. Real dinner, not business, not pretending, just people sharing a meal." Something in Margaret's chest loosened. "Deal." The wedding was held in a garden Margaret had once loved. White roses everywhere. David stood at the altar looking happy, genuinely happy with his bride Sarah, a warm-faced teacher who'd probably never missed a single school play. Thomas appeared at Margaret's door that morning in a borrowed suit, slightly too big in the shoulders. He held out his arm. "Ready?" They walked in together, heads turned, not because Thomas was distinguished or wealthy, but because there was something honest about aiming two people facing an uncomfortable moment with quiet courage. "That's her," Margaret heard someone whisper. "With some waiter." Thomas felt her stiffen. He leaned close. "You know what I learned from being a single dad? People's opinions weigh exactly what you let them weigh. Usually nothing." During the ceremony, Margaret's eyes grew damp. Not from regret. David deserved happiness, but from recognition. She'd been so busy building that she'd forgotten to live. Thomas handed her his handkerchief without a word. At the reception, David approached their table. "Sir," beside him. Margaret braced herself. "Margaret," David said warmly, "I'm glad you came." "Really?" He glanced at Thomas. "I'm David, Thomas Sullivan." "Pleasure." Sarah smiled. "We were hoping you'd be here, Margaret. David always said you had the biggest heart of anyone he knew. You just worked so hard protecting it." Margaret blinked, surprised by the kindness. They really talkative for 20 minutes, about the old days, about different paths, about David's new stepchildren and Sarah's classroom stories. When they left, Margaret felt lighter. "You didn't have to pay someone," David said gently at the end. "We would have understood." Margaret glanced at Thomas, who was carefully folding his napkin. "I didn't pay him, he's my friend." And somehow, in saying it, it became true. That evening, Thomas's small apartment smelled like spaghetti sauce. Ma, bright-eyed and curious, had set the table with mismatched plates. "Dad says you own hotels," Emma said, serving garlic bread. "That must be cool." "It is," Margaret admitted, "but sometimes I forget what they're for. They're supposed to be places where people feel at home." "I haven't felt at home in years." "Home isn't a place," Emma said matter-of-factly. "It's people who are glad you're there." Thomas smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm 12. I know everything." They laughed together, and Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in decades: a belonging. Over simple pasta and cheap wine, Thomas told stories about Emma's school adventures. Emma showed Margaret drawings. They didn't talk about business or status or the wedding. They talked about favorite books and bad movies and the neighbor's ridiculous cat. "Thank you," Margaret said as she prepared to leave. "For today." For this, Thomas walked her to the door. "You don't need fake anything, Margaret. You just need to let people see who you really are." "And who's that?" "Someone kind, someone lonely, someone who deserves better than eating success for breakfast." Margaret felt tears threaten again. Would you both like to have dinner next week?" "Real dinner." "My treat, but not business." "Just friends." Emma appeared beside her father. "Can we go to that place with the good breadsticks?" "Absolutely," Margaret laughed. Driving home, Margaret thought about the day she'd gone to prove she was fine, that she'd moved on. Instead, she'd learned she didn't need to prove anything. She'd learned that kindness didn't require polish, that family came in unexpected forms, that sometimes the bravest thing wasn't building an empire, it was accepting an invitation to share simple pasta with people who saw you, really saw you, and were glad you'd come. The next morning, Margaret made a call. "Thomas, that front desk position in the downtown hotel, the one with better hours and benefits, it's yours if you want it." Emma could do homework in the business center. "Better lighting than restaurant corners." "Margaret, you don't have to." "I know. I want to." "Not charity. I need good people." "You're good people." There was a long pause. "Thank you," Thomas said quietly. "No," Margaret replied. "Thank you for reminding me what really matters." She hung up and looked at her calendar, packed solid for months. Slowly, she began making space, for dinners, for people, for life beyond the empire she'd built as a fortress. Sometimes the biggest success isn't what you build, it's what you finally allow yourself to receive. And sometimes, a fake boyfriend for a day becomes the real friend who helps you find your way home.